Jeg står ude for en Bicycle Brewing, hvor jeg skal ind og snakke med Alex, der er en af ejerne af den her brewpub og et lille bryggeri herinde. Så ja, prøv at komme med ind og kigge. Hi Alex, can you tell me something about Bicycle Brewing?
Yeah, hey Lars. Yes, we are a small brewpub and brewery here in Østerbro. We got started about 3 years ago, June 2018. We opened to the public, but we'd actually been brewing here a little bit longer than that, sort of working with the equipment and doing some private events.
Yeah, okay. So what's the story with Bicycle Brewing? How did you start? And
It's actually, I guess in a way, it's a long story. At least goes a lot back into the past. But I made my first beer, with a home brewing kit in a kitchen in San Francisco in 1999.
Yeah.
And I guess I was amazed that you could do that, and got really into it, and sort of shared that with my my friends and my family, and just kept doing it and getting more and more sophisticated about it. And then met my wife, or now my wife, Christina, in 2002. And we've actually been brewing together ever since.
Okay, cool.
But for us, the big change or catalyst maybe for starting this business, it's something we'd thought about for a long time. But what we ended up doing is in 2015, we quit our jobs here in Copenhagen. We'd had 15-year careers in different things, and decided just to travel for a year. And we did a lot of things on that trip, but one of the things we did was kind of pursue this interest in beer and brewing. So we visited 44 different breweries all around the world, meeting brewers, working on recipes, and drinking a lot of beer.
A year of drinking beer. Yeah, cool. So why did you take the step to start your own?
I think it's something we thought about for a long time and probably talked about a lot, over some beers. I think we have friends now that remind me that I was talking about this, 15 years ago or something, right?
Okay.
But I think we knew we wanted to do something, but didn't know what it should be exactly. Like what
the
kind.
Concept and okay.
Exactly, right? We just didn't know how there's so many different ways you can have a brewery or work with beer, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But it was partly this trip, I think, like seeing what we did by visiting all these brew pubs and breweries around the world, is see all these different ways you can like manifest a beer business, right? And see what was cool about the different ones, and then just decided, this kind of, the vision for this kind of crystallized, right? And then it made sense,
Yeah. So what you have now is a brew pub and a bottle shop in another location?
Yeah, exactly. So it was November of last year, we opened the bottle shop. So that was sort of our big expansion.
Yeah.
And what we did is we moved some of our production over there. So we actually make ciders on location at the bottle shop, and we kept all the beer production here.
Yeah.
So the two places now.
Yeah. Okay. And why the name? Because that, it struck me as odd for a brewery to call it Bicycle Brewing.
It's a good question. Sometimes I've gotten asked like if it's a bike shop or people. But the story behind that is actually, there's a photograph we have on the wall here that's a short john bike. When we were first getting started, we made this box where you could serve 2 small kegs, directly from the bike.
Okay.
It was pretty simple, but a lot of fun. We took it to Fælleparken, to friends' places, and served our beer that way. And then we just were thinking, bicycling, Copenhagen, sort of cycling culture.
Yeah.
It seemed
the
like
cycling capital of the world.
Totally, right? So it seemed like a super nice fit. And then what we did is we kind of doubled down on that concept, and we had a couple of really cool like custom bikes made for us that we can serve and transport beer. So we have one that's sort of like a transport truck. It has actually 4 wheels, but it can carry 250 kilos of kegs and equipment and whatever. So we take that all over the city. And then we have another one that is built around, it's actually a solar panel, powers refrigeration with a tap tower like this.
Yeah.
And so we can serve beer at like festivals and parties and stuff. So we kind of like expanded on the idea.
Around that concept. Okay, that's cool. Was it hard to get started? Was it a long process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hard. It was a lot of hours and a lot of new things to learn, right? And of course, with this kind of business, also with other food businesses and things, but there's a lot of regulations and permits that one has to have. The permit for having this activity in this location, tax, fulva, all these different things. And so of course, navigating and learning. But you know, in most cases, I would say it wasn't really difficult. Like a lot of the authorities that I've worked with, they're actually pretty easy to contact. You can ask questions.
And they were helpful?
Totally, yeah. And I don't know what I expected, but I was actually sort of pleasantly surprised that it seemed like the goal was to help us do it right, not to sort of punish us for doing it wrong, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And at least I found with some of those things, this was the first time for doing some of that, and I found that, you know, as long as we tried our best and were professional about it, then the outcome was okay, was good. You know, it wasn't that you had to know some secrets that you know that you couldn't find out. So that actually was okay. But then again, of course, all the work that went into this. I mean, it was like a million tiny steps over a long period of time, and I think some businesses, you know, maybe. Some businesses start where someone just, you know, borrows a lot of money and just, you know, makes a big thing. But for us, it was very like lots of little steps. Small steps. So it took time.
What sets you apart from other brew pubs and small breweries, and what's special about Bicycle Brewing?
It's a good question. I think what's fun about us, and of course it's true for other small breweries, but what we are is we are truly like the smallest brew pub like this in Copenhagen. Maybe not in Denmark, I don't know. But I think, and what's fun about that is being so close to the production. And we're lucky.
Actually, it's 1.5 meters.
Exactly. And we're literally, you know, working in there. You know, I told you brewing twice this week here, and so people really get to see that. Of course, these days, I mean, it's a good day to like beer in Copenhagen. I mean, there are a lot of great breweries, and there's a lot of fresh beer being made. But so I guess, and that's true of a lot of us smaller craft breweries, that freshness is sort of super key. But that is definitely a thing that we do here, right? And certain styles we like to make, you know, a lot of the IPAs we make and stuff, they hugely benefit from being super fresh.
Super fresh,
And I guess also with a small batch, nothing sits around for very long. You know, we make a 200-liter batch of beer and it sells within a few weeks, right? So everything is being drank almost at like perfect freshness, and I think that makes us that kind of focus, you know, and really focusing on, I guess, wanting to make the absolute best beer we can. So we don't think about ingredient cost. You know, we buy the best stuff we can to make the best beer we can.
Cool. So, what's your motivation for keep doing this? Because I guess the hours and it's not a 9-to-5 job.
I've been thinking about that. You know, it's funny because I really enjoy it, right? And so I don't think of it as work maybe, but it is a lot of hours. And in the first year, you know, we were open, we're still open 3 nights a week here at the brew pub. But the first year at least, I worked all the shifts at the bar, and I worked probably 50 hours doing everything else. And so, I mean, it was pretty crazy, you know, and exhausting, you know. But luckily, over time, you know, as we've grown a little bit now, we have a small team, and so other people help with things. That gives me more time to do new things, maybe, or that's also how we got to the bottle shop, right? It's like you have to have time to think of what you want to do next. If you're too busy doing what you do every day, you can get kind of stuck. But yeah, I like it. It's a lot of work, but I guess when you love doing it, it doesn't feel
really work.
It doesn't feel that way, right?
No. Okay. So what kind of beers are you brewing? What's your specialty?
One thing we've done, you know, as a brew pub, I really wanted to, you know, make a lot of different kinds of beers they're sort of drinkable is a general category, right? So we definitely make some sort of, we use some exotic ingredients, we make some unusual beer styles, but we often like to make beers that people will, rather than having a beer and saying, wow, that's interesting, we want someone to have a beer and say, wow, can I have another glass, you know? But we make, over the 3 years, it's been fun to actually experiment as a brewer. So we've made a lot of different styles. I think we're on our sort of batch 115 now, and, you know, more than half of those have been unique beers, right? And a lot of different styles. But in terms of what we specialize in, I would say it's largely, you know, we focus a lot on IPAs, all different types, you know, everything from black IPAs to double New England style IPAs. But what's fun about that style for us is it helps, I think, show off what small breweries can do best, you know? And it's where we shine a little bit.
And there's so many varieties within IPAs, so
Totally right. Totally. And so that I think is really fun. There's also a lot of demand for it.
It's a trend right now, right?
Exactly. And a big trend it has been for a long time. But because freshness is so important for those beers, one, freshness with our production, but also we can do some techniques for how we use hops, you know, in the brewing process that maybe larger breweries don't do, or it's not as, you know.
You Carlsberg can't really do the same. They can make great beer, but they can't make like you can here. Yeah,
exactly.
With the hops and everything.
Yeah, exactly right. So that seems like a good way for us to focus. But then we also make, I really like, dark beers myself. So we sort of always are making sort of stouts and porters of different types. Yeah. We make some seasonal beers, Christmas beers. We also make some fruit sours, lagers, and pilsners of different kinds. So we sort of like to do everything, but there's certain things I think we really do best. And that's probably the IPAs, maybe some of the fruit sours, and maybe some of the dark beers. But
cool. How do you develop your recipes? How do you come up with new beers?
Part of it is just having been a home brewer for, 20 years almost before this. I've tried a lot of things, and maybe like you too, you build up sort of, you slowly work on a recipe, you try changing this or that or something else, and sort of incrementally, and eventually you find out that you've actually tried a lot of different ingredients in different combinations, right? So typically what we do is, at least when we're making a new beer, we obviously start from the style, and we think about some of the main things that would define that style, and then we use this this knowledge from past beers to make something new. Yeah. But even the beers, there are some beers we really like where we sort of have a core recipe, but even that we change almost every time, and that's in some small, not necessarily in a big way, but like a small way, just because that's interesting to us. Yeah. And I think also fun for people. So maybe we have a beer where we just sort of change the main hop each time. Everything else stays constant, but the main hop in the beer will change. And then
So do people notice that, or is it only you?
I think, sometimes it's only me. And I think the funny thing with some of these beers is when you have, since there might be 2 or 3 months between them, even people that come and regularly and have them, I don't know if with 2 months distant, you can remember the difference, right? No. So it's a little hard. But we did do one thing, actually, a more immediate experiment. We made one kind of a hazy IPA where we actually dry hopped it in the kegs with 7 different hops. Yeah. So we actually had 7 different versions of the same exact beer, and they ended up fairly different. And that was an interesting way that people could really experience what that hop, maybe this hop's a little bit more, the certain, fruit, this one, a tiny bit of grassy. We used Sriracha Ace in one of them, which definitely has a bit of a grassiness to it, but it came out in a nice way in this particular beer. And so that was kind of fun.
Yeah, that's a cool experiment. What defines a good beer in your mind?
Well, I think, basically, I guess to be a good beer, there's certain sort of technical sort of brewing things one has to do right to just get a good beer, right? For sure, right? And then
right amount of yeast, temperature, and stuff like that.
Yeah, precisely. So you don't end up with something that's just off. You can immediately taste if a beer has gone wrong in some way, either from the technical brewing process or something that hasn't been kept clean or whatever, right? But then I think for me, it's a lot. We like to do things in sort of nicely balanced. I like using interesting, unusual sometimes ingredients, but I like to kind of keep things in a nice balance, again, for that sort of drinkability. So for me, like a really good beer often is one that isn't a beer that necessarily I like those too. Breweries these days are making all kinds of cool, crazy stuff. But I kind of like a beer maybe that just has, you want to go back for a second sip to taste something in it, right?
So it's more balanced and
and maybe subtle, some not subtle, but like somewhat subtle versus things that just I guess hit you over the head.
Yeah, those are interesting too. But when you try it once and then you try another one,
that's maybe
you don't go for the same.
It's maybe like a tasting experience, which can be super interesting. But it is. It's also a super fun time for brewing in the sense that. There's a lot of breweries sort of pushing the limits.
And people are open-minded. They want to try new things, and because like 15 years ago it was Tuborg Classic, and that's a special kind of beer. But today it's craft brewing is really risen up, and people are open-minded to it. I think.
Totally, and obviously you witnessed it more than me, but I did first visit Copenhagen, I guess in 2003, and I feel like I've just seen this entire transformation. You know what I mean?
The whole culture just evolved.
It's really great, and I think also part of that evolution in some of the early kind of pioneers or front runners or whatever, it's also made it possible for the rest of us to exist.
Maybe. Exactly, like Mikkeller and
exactly. I wonder if maybe we could have, but I wonder if we could really have existed 15 years ago. We couldn't have been the first, We have to be in a place where people know something about what we're doing and appreciate it, right? That makes it a lot easier, right?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So can you take us really quick through a typical brew day?
Yeah. So we typically start fairly early in the morning, so maybe around 7 o'clock in the morning, and wrap up usually around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a full day, right? Maybe similar to roughly to how long you spend also. But what we do is we have the Spidel Braumeister in the back there, 200 liters. Fill that up with water. Then we add the milled grain. We go through the mashing process. Then we boil the beer, add the hops. Cool it down. We actually cool everything down in the Braumeister. It has a double wall, so it actually allows for cooling that way. That process is a little bit slow, but because we've put the lid on and like sanitized everything with steam just a minute or two before the end of the boil, it's actually a perfectly good way for us to do it. And then we pump everything into one of our fermentation tanks. We have 4, 2 larger and 2 smaller. It depends a little bit. If we're making sort of a higher ABV beer, we use the smaller tanks. We make a smaller batch. If we're producing sort of more like around 6% or lower, we can make a roughly 200 liter batch. And then of course, as you know, there's a fair amount of prep and cleanup, which I guess I sort of skipped over that part, but that's the other big part of the day. But typically what I do here, because there are obviously some down times, I've sort of set everything up here to be done by one person. So it really there's only really space for one person, and it really only needs one person, but there's a lot of downtime. And then what I can typically do is either do something else. I mean, sometimes, just work on other elements of the business, or potentially, you could keg another beer during some of the time. So there's ways we can keep busy.
Cool. So what do you do with your water? Because the water in Copenhagen is pretty harsh. It's hard. Do you have some filtering system, or what do you do with your water?
Yeah, good question. So we exactly the same. Anyone who lives in Copenhagen totally knows that it's super full of calcrete, calcium, magnesium, other things. I mean, it's great water, but it just has a ton of minerals in it, right? Which is not ideal for certain beer styles in particular. But what we do is I liked the idea of using the water as sort of a local resource. So what we do is we have it tested on a regular basis, because the city, you can actually get reports from the city on what's in the water, but the problem we have is we're actually fed by 2 different reservoirs, I found out. So they can't tell you exactly because it's a blend. So we just have to have it tested by a lab once in a while, right? And so then we know exactly what's in it, and then what we do is sort of build on that. So then we adjust the water profile for each individual beer based on the starting point. And if it should be a beer where simply some of those minerals are just too much, then we will filter, reverse osmosis filter some or all of the water in order to deal with that. But basically, we try to use it mostly when we can, and then filter when needed. Right?
Cool. What's your best seller? What? Both here and in the bottle shop.
It's an interesting point. And I think, here at when I've seen over the few years, typically sort of different IPAs and maybe lighter beers sell the most in the bar, right? And then the darker beers last a little longer. And I think that just reflects the general taste of the sort of average person a little bit, right? I find a little bit interesting with now having the shop and selling more things in bottles that what people I think sometimes look for in bottles might be a little different than what they look for in a bar. And that's maybe kind of obvious, but
so it's darker beers in the bottle shop or heavier beers? Or?
Sometimes I think sometimes with the bottle shop, we often get people that also because we package our beers in large bottles, so I think sometimes people are maybe looking for something sort of special or something maybe a little more unusual, or they're bringing something as a host gift, or they're coming, or it's a gift for somebody. So definitely still IPAs, but then sometimes slightly more, I think, some of our more experimental beers, I should say, maybe are more interesting to people in bottles, because that's sort of a different way people are getting the beer and sharing the beer than as much at the bar. But I would say, but IPAs almost for sure the top seller, and then probably lighter beers like a Pilsner or other kinds of lagers. But some of the beers people love most, or like the most, what do you call it, vocal feedback people give, can often be for some of our fruit sours and stuff like this, which are super fun beers for the people that like them. But for people that don't know them so well, then it's a little bit,
too much.
Okay.
Who's your brewing idol?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if that's hard for me to answer, but for me, my influence, I guess, a lot comes from, so I grew up in California near San Francisco. And so for me, I don't exactly remember it because it was right around, I guess, when I was when I was born. But there was this whole, I guess, the transformation of the American craft brewing scene with some of the first what we call like modern American IPAs getting brewed like in the 80s, late 70s, 80s in California or in the West Coast. Yeah. And a lot of those influenced when I did become a beer drinker, when I was old enough to drink, or maybe a little bit before in the US, there were things like we had, there's Anchor Liberty Ale, there was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, classic pale ale, classic, made with a Cascade, I think, right? Yeah. And so a lot of those beers influenced and then they started getting more and more bitter, more and more hoppy, and that's that really sort of influenced me as a initial beer drinker, right, and brewer. And so some of those breweries I still look to. Of course, beers changed a ton, and then at least in the IPA world, then there was the East Coast, New England style that came crashing in, right? And so that's been super fun to see too. But definitely my influence was sort of from that, from where I started.
Are you still using a lot of American hops, or are you?
We do, especially for IPAs, a lot. There's also some varieties that we like a lot that are, maybe Australian or New Zealand to some degree. We made an IPA recently where we used a South African hop variety. But a lot of the big ones we use that we really like are American hops. So
So what's your favorite brewery?
Also a tough question. Yeah, I don't know. I like, for me, I like trying different beers, and we visit a lot of different places. We did also on that trip I mentioned, right? So it's hard to pick out a favorite. But here in Copenhagen, what we go to when we don't come here, we go over to Brews. We also go to War Pigs. Those are beers I like in the city. Of course, there's also Amma Brewhouse. So we're lucky to have a bunch of good ones right here. But
there are many great places. So what is the next step for you?
What I'd like to do is we've definitely reached the capacity of what we can sort of produce for the two places we have here. And I think the core of what we're doing is these places and people's experience at them. And I think that's great, and we want to keep that. But I also like potentially the idea of beginning to partner or work with some other potentially local restaurants or the local shops or the local bars. But to be able to do that, we have to change something or find a way to produce at a larger volume. So we're looking into some ways of doing that. And I don't know exactly how that will work. And obviously my focus still is 100% on this, but that would be a nice next step. And it's not the goal to become like huge, but just, I think it would be cool. We know a lot of other, we know some of the local restaurant owners, and I think it'd be super cool. And they're interested in having like a local Østerbro beer.
To keep it local. And that'd be awesome.
So I think that would be a lot of fun. So that could be a potential next step for us.
Yeah. Cool. Should we go look at the bottle shop?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, cool. Let's do that.
All right.
So Alex, last question. Can you tell us something about the bottle shop that we're in now?
Yeah, definitely. So we opened this place, I guess sort of right in the middle of Corona, but last November. And the idea here is, it's obviously an expansion from the brewery around the corner. But what we do here is we produce cider. So we're making a whole variety of different types of apple cider, also pear and also black currant, and also sometimes using some other fruit, like making red berries and apple, different things. And then we're open as a shop during the day, where we sell both our own beer in bottles and then some other mostly local producers of beer, cider, wine.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time, and thanks for your interview.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Cool.